Crossover, quick release. Oh, baby, and the foul. Woo. Offensive rebound for Watson.
32 seconds. Shot clock differential about 14 seconds. 3-point lead.
Who run shit like me? Top 5 basically. I still play for keeps. Ain't no fantasy. Hey.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 8 of Divine Providence. I am your host, Leb, along with Mac. The Friars are in first place in the Big East. Stop the count. We are Big East regular season champions. It's over. So, Mac, how are we feeling?
You summed it up perfectly. Friars are 1-0, statistically speaking, best team in the Big East. No one can prove it otherwise for at least a week, I believe. I believe no other Big East teams play until next Tuesday. So, I mean, we're sitting pretty.
Yeah. Hey, it could be worse. You know, we got a road win last night at DePaul. DePaul looked pretty good team. We got Mohegan coming up. That'll be fun for the Friar fans. We hope to see a lot of Friar fans at Mohegan. So we do want to touch on the URI game first. Obviously, that was a very tough performance. Tale of two halves. Really, obviously, had the first half, which they controlled the game completely. Really had a chance to kind of put them away. Then you had the second half, which it was kind of the worst brand of basketball, in my opinion, that we've seen this season, which is saying a lot because they've had some really, really terrible halves. And also URI lost to Brown last night, so now that loss is just going to sink, kind of like what we expected. How are your feelings after the URI game?
Yeah, I mean, it did feel like the walls were caving in on us at Friartown. It wasn't a great brand of basketball, like you said. That second half, you go into the half up 7. You're expecting, all right, just hold them off for another 20 minutes, and you're sitting pretty going into conference play. But the second half was sloppy. Lack of intensity, lack of awareness, shots weren't falling. It was the perfect storm of just fuckery, and it was just not great to watch. Obviously, against an in-state rival, it just amplifies how bad it was.
For sure. And you can't play the whole game of just waiting to win. That's one thing that I feel like a lot of college teams fall into the trap of. We did this a lot during the Keno Davis era. I feel like we didn't have this problem a lot with Cooley. But you fall into the trap of you have a little bit of a lead, and maybe you're controlling the game a lot, and then you're kind of just waiting for the clock to run out, but you're not really playing to your full potential. And that clearly was one of the issues with the URI game. The bright side is Bryce did look pretty good. He looked very agile, played a pretty clean game, played a lot of minutes as well. It looks like he's kind of fully out there now. Who else had a pretty decent, talking about the positives, who else had a decent game against URI? I think Bensley Joseph had a pretty good game.
Yeah, Bensley Joseph, I mean, he's all reliable at this point. Obviously, you like to expect you're going to get the Bryce that we've seen going forward. But the first 8 or 9 games of the year, Bensley Joseph is old reliable. I'm going to keep going back to the well, man, but Kreese looked good in that first half. He had a terrible one of the worst turnovers I've ever seen in the second half. But he was holding his own and looked good. He had good footwork in the post. Jane Pierre hit a couple shots. So you got decent chunks of minutes from guys, but Bensley Joseph was really the only one you got start to finish, some sort of reliability on both ends of the ball.
Yeah, and the one of the team's strong suits has to be depth, right? We always talked about that all summer, right, with the whole 13 dudes thing. And they are a deep team on paper, but sometimes they don't play like they're a deep team in the slightest because you look at some of the just scoring, right? Just this is just scoring. Obviously, there's so many parts of the game, but you have Wesley Cardette 3 points, Jabri 3 points. Corey Floyd, 4 points. Rich Barron, 0. Oswin, 5, which that's totally fine for him. So not really criticizing him at all. The bulk of your scoring came from Bensley, Jaden Pierre with 12, and then Bryce Hopkins with 16. So Bensley and Hopkins were tied for 16. Kreist also only had 4 points. Again, not looking for a ton of offensive output from him, but you have to get more from your bench, especially in a tough road game like that where energy is high. It's a rivalry game. Guys are going to get maybe a little more tired because the other side is playing with a ton of intensity. So you're running the floor, you're working really hard. You got to get more from these guys that are coming off the bench, especially like a Rich Barron, who had a great freshman year, came into this season, a lot of high hopes. I think he struggled to find his way in the rotation or his kind of position in the rotation more so. You just got to get more from your bench for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, it's a blessing and a curse having depth because we've talked ad nauseum at this point about how, you can't get the rotations under wraps and, guys are standing for too long, guys that are playing well or aren't staying in long enough. It's a good problem to have when you can fall back on someone or 2 to 3 guys that are going to be consistent, can bring intensity on defense, and can put the ball in the hoop. I don't know if we've had many games this year where 3, 4, 5 guys you feel comfortable putting out there knowing they're going to win their matchup. And I think that's been the biggest issue so far.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's unfortunate to lose that game. You really wanted to get a win, especially like you said, going into Big East play. I hate losing that game. Obviously, we talked about it. I hate that game in general. But it is what it is. Eventually, you just got to put it behind you and look ahead to DePaul, which they had the DePaul game last night. I don't know if that was really any better of a game when it comes to just a sheer play standpoint. But they won, and they're 1-0 in the Big East, and it's a Big East road win, which there was a time in this program's history where road wins in the Big East were impossible to come by. Just like, kind of what Georgetown is dealing with right now. So you'll take it, right? It wasn't pretty, but they did squeak out a win. How did you feel about the game last night?
It was definitely not pretty. I mean, the intensity sort of picked up. The team played well on defense, like vintage Providence defensive performance for 90% of the game. Outside of that kid Skogman, is it Skogman?
Yeah, Skogman, yeah.
He got left open a handful of times and was lights out. But outside of those, handful of plays, the defense looked great. It was an ugly win. I'm not necessarily happy about the way they played. But I think that can also exist with saying DePaul is a legitimate Big East team this year. I think Chris Holtman came in, knew what he wanted, put the right pieces in place, and this is not your uncle's DePaul team. Like, this is a team that can win, worst case scenario, a handful of games in the Big East and not go, 0-20. I think they showed a stat that, their last Big East win was January of 2023. This team is legit, and they took a team in Providence that's obviously not playing great as of late to overtime, but I think the two statements can coexist. Like, Providence got out of there with a very ugly win, but DePaul is also a very competitive and can be a respectful Big East team this year.
Yeah, and honestly, DePaul kind of in a similar situation that URI was in, right? Like, URI had really no tests this year coming into the game against PC, and they passed their first big test. Same thing with, like I said, DePaul haven't really played anyone. PC being the first team that they've kind of, had to really get up for, top 100 team. Obviously it's a home game. So DePaul clearly passed the test just like you or I did. And I mean, I was impressed by watching them. obviously you have a similar team to PC makeup wise in terms of like 3-point shooting. They like to shoot the ball. Holtman, I don't really know too much about Holtman in terms of like his offensive scheme. Obviously, he coached in the Big East before, but it's you know you don't really pay attention to those kinds of things. You kind of just hope for a win, and you watch your team, right? So from watching last night, they are a little similar to PC, but Providence played really well for stretches, and then some stretches they played just really, really terrible. One of those issues, obviously, continues to be the 5 spot. You have a situation where Kreist, Oswin, now you have Bryce Hopkins in the fold. Oswin looked good, so that's a positive, but kind of more of the same from Kreist. Do you have a kind of a solution in mind for the 5?
Yeah, and I think it was pretty clear last night. I think they're going to be, and it might sound cliche, but there might be different situations where different bigs are going to need to be called upon. I think if you're playing against a Creighton and you're facing another immobile big who is, a freak of nature, 7'3", you're going to need a guy like Kreist down there to bang with him. No Diddy. But just to be that unmovable force, ideally, as opposed to an Oswin who's a little slimmer and, maybe he can make up for his lack of size and his vertical, but isn't necessarily the unmovable force that you want down low against a bigger guy. As opposed to last night when you saw Oswin kind of came along. He looked awesome. He had he only got credited for 3 blocks. I think he got his hands on a handful of shots and didn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. But he looked great last night. And like you said, this is a team that likes to shoot threes. This is a little bit of a smaller team, a little more fast-paced team that you want a guy like Oswin in there. He can rim run on smaller guys. And then people have also talked about the small ball lineup. I know we've gotten a couple questions about, like, what would the small ball lineup look like with Bryce at the 5? I don't think, and this might be a super hot take, I don't think Bryce Hopkins belongs playing the 5. I think if you want to run a small ball lineup, that is the role that is tailor-made for an Eli DeLaurier. So, like, you might not get minutes out of him every night, but if you need to go small, he's the guy that is a little bit of a spark plug, can run the floor, and isn't your prototypical big, and still allows Bryce to kind of not take on as many responsibilities as a typical 5-man would. Bryce can kind of still get out and run. I just think that lineup with Eli and Bryce should be that go-to small ball lineup. And again, maybe I'm so off about that, but that was just what I noticed last night.
I don't hate that. I don't know about Eli getting consistent minutes, maybe 10 minutes a game, maybe a few minutes here and there. I definitely think that Bryce, I don't love the idea of Bryce playing the 5. For offensive purposes, I think it helps. And I think you can go there in times of offensive stagnancy where you don't really have a lot going on. Kind of like the Ryan Mila substitutions, where you kind of plug him in because the offense is just not moving properly and things aren't really going well. And he kind of gives a little bit of a spark plug to your offense. Same kind of thing with Bryce, maybe sliding down to the 5. These guys, you watch Oswin, you watch Kreist, and they're not terrible, but it's more of I think it's more of a mental thing. And really, I think, honestly, it's more of a coaching thing. I think they need to be coached a little bit more, because you even watch just a very standard pick and roll, something you learn in CYO. And you watch these guys come off the pick, and it's very it's almost like they just know they're not going to get the ball. Why even set the screen, or not to set the screen? Why even roll at that point? If you're not going to anticipate a pass, if you're not going to actually try to get open after you roll, then just get out of the way. If you're going to just let Bensley drive after a screen, or Jaden Pierce shoot after a screen, just move. It's just such a lackadaisical role, and they're not even looking for the ball. You set a screen, cut hard to the hoop. Like, look for the ball. Move, you use your body. Like, they have huge bodies, but they don't use them, especially like a pick and roll situation is a very physical play. I just want to ask these guys sometimes, like, are you okay with playing physical? Because it just doesn't seem like it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think I really do hope, and might be the optimist in me, but like I hope it's a developmental thing. It's a mental thing that can be taught. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is our oldest big man is Christos Andiko, who's a sophomore. So we lack a lot of experience at that 5 position, which I think is going to be an Achilles heel, especially once you get into the teeth of Big East play. But it's got to be a learning curve, and it's obviously a necessary part of basketball, and it's essentially the backbone to an offense, especially an offense like Kim's, where if you're not shooting a 3, you want to get to the hoop, you want those high percentage shots. You got to hope that it can be taught, and maybe we're an off season away from seeing what we want out of an Oswin or a Kriest, but that's not going to win games right now, unfortunately.
Definitely. And Oswin, I mean, it might not even be an offseason. It might just be as he goes along this year, because he hasn't played I hate using this. Like, people always say he hasn't played a ton of basketball. Well, that's like not true, because Oswin, I mean, he might be a little newer to the game, but the guy was a top 50 recruit. To be a top 50 recruit, you're literally touching a basketball like 8 hours a day. I mean, you're playing a ton of basketball. And in practice, he's playing a ton of basketball. The guy lives and breathes basketball at this point. So maybe it's just more of Oswin just being comfortable with the idea of, playing against really good competition. Because I think you can say that. Maybe he hasn't played against great competition for a long period of time. Kriest, like, I feel like Oswin's development path is very linear, whereas Kriest is like just kind of up and down. And again, that's where it kind of goes back to the coaching. I feel a little bit has to be on the coaching staff, because one game Kriest will look, like a very okay, average center, a Big East player. And then some games he'll just look like he just doesn't belong on the floor. And that's frustrating. And I'm not trying to bash the guy. Obviously, again, not trying to spend time talking about Kriest and his issues. I think there's a lot of bright spots there, but it's frustrating as a fan to watch that, because the whole summer you were told how great, the center room is going to be. And it really has been their biggest hindrance so far. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, and like I said, this is my cop out, but I'll go back to youth. I mean, it's seniority in college is a real thing. We saw to you or I, like, winning on the road in college is hard. There are just things in college basketball that for an 18 to 20-year-old are just very tough to stomach. I mean, just the developmental phase, going into a hostile environment. DePaul wasn't exactly a hostile environment, but just it's a youth thing. And hopefully they'll figure it out along the way. You mentioned Kriest is kind of up and down. He's a little volatile. He's like a crypto. The
Yeah.
highs are high, but the lows are low. Crypto Kriest.
Crypto Kriest.
Crypto Kriest. The highs are high, but the lows are low.
That's good. I think we got to run with that. I think we might have our first official Divine Providence nickname, Crypto Kriest.
Buy the dip, boys. Buy the dip.
I'm selling. You can hold with diamond hands on Kriest.
I'm holding on to it like it's
selling.
It's Dogecoin in 2020, brother.
No,
I'm holding on.
Yeah, I'm gonna sell. I'll buy Oswin stock. Give me all the Oswin stock, or all the Oswin coin. But Kriest, again, I think that There's a lot of potential there. And it's tough to say like everything you want to say because I don't want to be overly positive, right? Because we want to be very like we want to be truthful. Obviously, we don't want to be overly negative. I do find that there's a lot of over defending, within the fan base of the coaching staff of some of the players. Like criticism is fine. I know we talked about this last time, but at the end of the day, like these guys are getting paid, and to criticize them is okay on their play. We don't want to criticize them on their personal lives, things like that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, Creased, give me Oswin for 20 minutes or at least 25 minutes a night. Creased for like maybe 10 to 15, right? And then I think Bryce maybe the rest of the way with him at the 5 or Eli. That's fine. I think there's a special game that Eli should play in, and it's probably not every night, but when it's there, it's like, all right, this is a good time for him to go in. Just kind of like Mila.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you were just talking about the minutes, and this made me think of it. Going back to the depth, I'm starting to warm up to the fact that Kim goes deep into the bench so early into games because this is where the depth can be a tool and not, a weakness. You throw 9 guys out there in the first 7 minutes of the game, you give every dude a shot to be like, all right, or even 10 guys in the first half of the first half. And just be like, all right, whose night is it? Who's on tonight? Who is, winning their matchups? Who's got this figured out? And then by the 6-7 mark in the first half, like you better figure out who the 7 to 8 guys are that you're running out. And, who's going to be your best 5 for the next 25 minutes of basketball. So I think that's where the depth can be good. So like the Creased and Oswin situation, let's say, Creased has a couple turnovers or, he has to come out to the perimeter to guard a big who can shoot and he gets beat off the dribble a handful of times. All right, well, it's Oswin's night. Oswin's part of that best 5 that we're throwing out there. But it's something that you need to figure out early in the game so you don't shoot yourself in the foot come the end of the first half and you're chasing a lead.
I think that's fair. I don't hate the idea of maybe like using the first half as kind of experimental to see whose game it might be. The only issue with that, I guess, is now, if you do maybe fall behind in the first half, you don't want to play catch up because they were behind against DePaul. They were down in the first half? I think they were down 8, maybe 10, or could be even 11. I don't remember the largest lead for DePaul, but it wasn't the first half. It was a tale of 2 halves. I mean, in the second half, you saw them go to the rack a lot more. You saw them get easy layups, although they missed some. Bryce had a layup. Bensley had a layup to win the game. Bryce had a putback to win the game. Both missed. But you had a lot more of a complete brand of basketball. Where in the first half it was kind of more of the same. Just try to find the open man, launch a 3, run down the shot clock. No one can't get an offensive rebound. So that's another issue. It's you don't really have like a dog rebounder. You don't have like a junkyard dog down there. Bryce Hopkins is a good rebounder, but when on offense, he's shooting the ball a lot. Sometimes he's at the 3-point line. You don't have like a LaDontae Henton, someone that can battle for rebounds on the offensive glass. So, yeah, like I said, tale of 2 halves, but happy to get out of there with the win. Anything else from the DePaul game? Oh, one thing. What about Jabri? I mean, we got to talk about Jabri. Jabri he did have a big shot. I'll give him that. He had a big shot, but he had a really tough game. I mean, travels, 1 3-pointer, just kind of like you are. Obviously, you're a big Jabri guy, just like you are Creased. So tough night for Mac. But what were your thoughts about Jabri?
Yeah, listen, as long as it ends in a Friar victory, I don't really care who gets the who gets the seat at the table. But I think, just turnovers in general in that first half were bad. They were like, it seemed like we had 3 or 4 possessions in a row where there were traveling violations. That was tough to watch. Jabri, I'm looking at the box score. He only took 3 shots. Like, maybe it was just a confidence thing, or just didn't like the shot. Maybe they were guarding him well. But 3 turnovers is definitely an issue for sure. Especially if you're not doing much with the ball in your hands. Took as many shots as turnovers. So, listen, I think he's one of those volatile guys too, because we've seen him light up BYU. I think he was the leading scorer against Stonehill. Like, when he's on, he's on. And he's one of those guys that, like, all right, well, maybe you can shave him at the end of the rotation. If he's not coming into a game and looking good shooting the ball in the first 5-6 minutes, like, all right, well, maybe it's a Corey Floyd game. Maybe it's a Rich Barron game. And that's the guy you want in there taking that, 3-and-D role. Because he has been hit or miss so far this year.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough because I really do like the idea of Jabri being there and being there consistently and playing that role. Like what you saw against BYU, not just Jabri, right? Not just to pick on him, but really the whole team. It's amazing how this team was the same team that played against BYU. Like, I understand, URI, really, really tough atmosphere to play in. But it's not like they couldn't do it. They controlled the game the whole first half. DePaul, obviously not a tough atmosphere. I think there was like 6 kids in the student section. But still a road game in the Big East, and you traveled, whatever it is, 1,500 miles. After probably not getting on a plane for a little while because you had a home game, then you had you had the URI game. So it was you have the Bahamas. Of course, that's the last time they traveled. So, whatever. Like, it's a Big East road game. But very, very seldom are you going to come into any Big East arena and play with so much confidence that you control the game. But I just can't believe that this was the same Jabri from the BYU game. In the BYU game, he just looked so good and efficient.
Yeah, he's a streaky shooter. When he's hot, he's hot. When he's cold, he's cold. I think the first episode of the show, I said there's gonna be a game where he goes for 30, and I think seeing the highs and lows so far this season, I think one of those games is just brewing. But it's one of those things you got to figure out in the first 8 to 10 minutes. Is Jabri on tonight? Is he ready to go? Is he on fire? And that answer should be evident by the end of the first half.
Yeah, for sure. Well, after all of that, you have the URI loss. You have the close game with DePaul. You have the 0-3 showing in the Bahamas. We're not in terrible shape. Season's not over yet. We have a few questions about kind of what we are needed to do in Big East play, right? Or what we think we need to do in Big East play to make the tournament. But KenPom right now, PC, we're 76 in KenPom. So that's just around where Notre Dame, George Mason, New Mexico, Drake, Colorado, some okay teams, right? You're probably going to see in March that are going to be battling for spots in the NCAA tournament. So it's not done yet, but we're going to have to probably win somewhere close to 14, 15 games in Big East play. Do we have a question about that? I think we do, right?
Yes. This comes from Avid Mindsetter. Said, question for the pod. How many Big East wins do you guys think would take to get a bid without having to win the Big East tournament? So I guess looking at it now, let's assume a win. No wins are given. That's been fairly obvious so far this year. But let's assume Mohegan comes around. Friars are 8-4, 19 Big East games in front of them. How many games do you think the Friars need to win to not have to rely on the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, to not to 100% like lead pipe lock, not have to worry about the Big East tournament. At large bid, I think you have to win 14 more. I know it sounds crazy. That's a huge number, but like I'm talking about like there's no doubt, leave no doubt whatsoever. I mean, you're competing more than likely. You'd be competing for a Big East regular season championship if you win 15 games in the Big East. So it's a lofty goal. I think 13 more, and you have a really, really good chance. I think 12 more, and you have a good chance. That's 13 wins if you got 12 more wins in the Big East. So tough.
I mean, I think, like you said, 15-5 probably puts you in the conversation for a Big East regular season championship. And I think people kind of get lost in that. I think after UConn last year, it's almost like, all right, well, 18-2 is the number to be to win the conference. That was such an anomaly of a season where, like, if you go back, it's teams that are winning 15, 16 games.
Right.
They usually take home that regular season crown. So I do think the obviously it's no secret the Big East will be less high ceiling, low floor, and a little more packed in. I think, yeah, like you said, 15 I think is no doubt like 100%. I think if we're staring down the barrel second week of March and the Friars have won 12 Big East games, they're 12-8. I think there's work to be done in the conference tournament. And I think you have to rely on winning a game or two, maybe making it to the Big East final. If you have a 20-12 record in a conference that may not look great at the end of the season. As far as not needing work to be done, it's probably that 13-14 range, I would say.
And what we've seen recently from the committee is they're not going to take the conference tournament into consideration for an at-large bid all that much. I mean, there might be, which I never really fully understood, because you're on a neutral, and they've said in years past that the field, the actual field, now seeding was up for determination based on conference tournament play, but the field was decided before the conference tournaments start. And then what they would do is they would eliminate teams as the bid stealers lost their, or as the bid stealers won their conference tournaments. So they would, chop teams off the block. That's dangerous territory. If you're going in and you don't really have a path to make the NCAA tournament, if you win, say you win 2 games in the Big East tournament, and they're 2 really good wins, but they don't really look at them like that. I don't love that idea, because it's a neutral site, and it should be looked at like that. So you might have to just kind of cement your position before the conference tournament.
Yeah, like you said, though, leave no doubt. You mentioned the selection committee. I've always said they factor in analytics way too much. And you mentioned Ken Palm earlier. Bart Torvik is a site I like to use, just because you can sort by time period. So if you take December 1st, so every game the Friars have played with Bryce, so December 1st on. Also, I only like analytics if it fits my narrative. But
yeah,
since Bryce came back, the Friars are 34th in the country on Bart Torvik. So that would put them as the 27th best offense, or I'm sorry, 27th best defense, and top 100 in offense. So 34th overall in the country. If you can keep that pace, I mean, there's no doubt you're a tournament team, I'd like to imagine. But that just goes to show the difference between when you zoom out and then you just look at what we've been fully healthy. obviously small sample size, but I saw a tweet maybe a week or two ago. It was some bracketology account, and they said if the committee judged Providence last year without Bryce Hopkins, they better get the same treatment when, they're comparing the team without Hopkins versus the team with Hopkins. Because, if March rolls around and let's say the Friars are 68th in KenPom, but if you sort that out and just take the team with Bryce, that number could be exponentially higher.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're
So
saying. Right.
I'm just very, very, very anti-selection committee, and I don't think there's a standardized selection process.
There isn't, and there's a lot of gray area to sift through, and I do feel like the committee kind of owes us one. Not as much for the Bryce thing. I mean, that should 100% be looked at, zero doubt. But last year, I mean, the Big East was in a really tough spot, and the committee kind of screwed us a little bit. The Mountain West got how many teams last year? 5, 6, right?
Yeah, they got a handful. It was at least 6.
Yeah, Big East had 3: Creighton, UConn, and Marquette. So I don't know if they're gonna, they're gonna owe us one, right? That's Val's job, to be down the committee's throat. Pause. Also not pause because she's a woman, so that's fine. So no need to pause, but down the committee's throat, like just crushing them, saying, "Hey, you screwed us last year. Like we need a break this year," and to remind the committee that, hey, Bryce Hopkins was out for a stretch this year. So I mean, if you look at the net, right, the net, that's kind of like the gold standard, I guess. You're not in terrible shape. You're at 72. The problem is Butler is at 71. Villanova is at, I don't know how Villanova's higher, but Villanova's at 63. Creighton's at 74. Creighton's supposed to be, a top 3 team in the league. Xavier is at 75. DePaul is at 82. So yeah, you're kind of all around the same area. So we're all kind of in the same fight right now, fighting for, a bubble spot. But you're not going to have a ton of opportunity for really good to stockpile really good wins or quad 1 wins for home games with this, how the league kind of performed in non-conference play. So you got to hope that you really can go on the road and get some wins, because like DePaul, right? That's a good example. That's a quad 1 win. So Big East road wins are going to be huge. But home, I mean, say you beat Xavier at home. They're, like I said, 75 in the net. It's not really going to move the needle all that much. That's a, quad 2? I mean, it is what it is,
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't realize that many teams were clumped together in that awkward back half of the top 75. But I mean, road games against a top 75 team, those do go down as quad 1. So I mean, if a bulk of the conference can stay in that neighborhood, obviously naturally some of these teams are going to kind of cannibalize each other like they did last year. But if these teams can stay in that range, I'm not sure really how the metrics work in the net, but like you said, you got to win road games, and winning road games is tough. Luckily, listen, we're 10% of the way through our road schedule, and we're 1-0. So that's all you can ask for. Best road team in the conference.
Best road team in the conference. Best team in the conference. Right. So
yeah. But you mentioned they kind of owe the Big East one. Do you know what pisses me off the most is that the Big East had every reason for that exact argument. Like, you owe us one. You screwed us last year. And then the league comes into the season and collectively, unless you're named Marquette, stinker of a non-con. Absolutely laid an egg and gave the committee pretty much every reason to give you the same treatment this year, because it's just going to be the conference cannibalizing each other again. So that kind of angers me a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. It was a missed opportunity for the Big East. A lot of talk in the offseason, a lot of, hey, what about me? Right? Hey, we're the best basketball conference in the country. And then to come out and just lose to some really, really bad teams, and some winnable games just kind of slip away. But again, having said that, there's a ton of teams in the top 100, and there's not a ton of teams in the back halves. Like last year you had DePaul and you had Georgetown. We've talked about that before. So that's good. DePaul and Georgetown probably will not hold the league back too much. Villanova has a surprisingly good net for how terrible they've been. Seton Hall, probably the worst team on here. I was looking for them. They are, let's see. Yeah, they're a little bit far down there.
They're going to be that one team that kind of ideally they just go 0-20 and every team takes their win against them because they're the low-hanging fruit in the conference this year, at least analytically.
They definitely are, and they're 202 right now. So that's going to be your biggest issue, for the conference. But DePaul was in the 300s last year, so certainly not. And Seton Hall still has a couple opportunities to move up a little bit. PC has a chance to move up. St. Bonaventure is 55 right now, so an opportunity for a neutral game that will be actually a pretty decent win for now. Once you get into A10 play, those losses, right? Davidson, URI, and then you have whatever St. Bonaventure is, whether it's a win or a loss, it's not going to be as good. Like you said, with the Big East cannibalizing itself, A10's worse. I mean, it's the reason why the A10 only gets maybe one or two teams in a year. It's because there's a lot of terrible teams in that conference, and sometimes wins don't help you at all, and losses kill you. So, it's going to be a tough road back.
If we go 0-3 against the A10, I don't know what else. You can find me in the bottom of the Providence River. I'll be done. That'll ruin my weekends too, especially like going to Mohegan. Oh, it's gonna be a great weekend watching Friars. No, I'm not even talking about it. I'm not talking about it. That would just be awful, deplorable. Some would call it. All right, let's move on to another question.
Cool.
So this one comes from Gicket Taines. He said, "What are your thoughts on possibly experimenting with Benz getting more minutes as the primary ball handler and utilizing JP more off the catch and shoot? JP is a great catch and shoot player, and I've heard some other people curious to see Benz get more minutes leading the charge. I think some of the plays we've seen with Benz as the primary ball handler have been pretty good. I'm interested to see if you guys think this could help us out at all." I've been on record saying JP is fantastic catch and shoot. Turnovers have been a problem. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but those are my two big points. Take him off the ball for ball security purposes and the fact that he's insane, just lights out when he catches and shoots. And then Bensley just looks like the Iceman in the pick and roll. Like he's just stone cold. So, like I said, don't want to waste too much time on it.
No, yeah. I mean, we've definitely talked about this before, but after these two games, right, we haven't recorded since after the BYU game. After these two games, I mean, there's zero doubt. Not only is Ben C. Joseph actually looking like a pretty good, I would say good, well above average point guard for a Big East team, but Jaden Pierre is not a point guard, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of different ways. But the biggest is that to bring a positive into this is the kid can shoot, just lights out. So run some plays for him to be off the ball and get open looks. And I think you're just going to have an offense that flows a lot better for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think with the ball in his hands, like he's quick enough where he can beat a dude off the baseline and get like a quick, easy layup. A little hop step, pump fake, and he's quick enough where he can beat dudes off the dribble. But primarily with the ball in his hands, it's just It's different.
Yeah.
If because I do think we are a year away from being the team that we all hope we are. Um, if we're going to be that team, number one on the portal priority list needs to be a pass first floor general point guard. So you can keep Jaden Pierre in that role his senior year. The guy could average 20 points a game if he's off the ball.
Yeah. No, I agree. Give me more Jaden Pierre and Bensley Joseph, like quick little floaters or step backs from the free throw line. I think that'll really open up the offense. They're really good at taking it to the bigs as well. Like, especially Bensley. Like, he has just no fear going up against someone who's, 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet even. Taking it right to their throats, trying to get a layup, maybe a little step back in there. So, yeah, I completely agree with Sir Gickett.
Sir Gickett. So this message comes from oh no, that's also Gickett, sorry. This one comes from Joey Marinaro. Said, hey, is it me or does it never seem like we pass it into the post when we have a mismatch after a switch? Seemed like several times last night, Oswin or Bryce was being defended by a small guard in the post and calling for the ball, and we swung it around the perimeter instead. Just wondering if I'm the only one seeing this. There were a couple times I noticed this last night. I haven't noticed it being a consistent issue, but the few times I did notice, a lot of times it was a big man guarding like one of our smaller guards, like a Jaden Pierre, Bensley Joseph, where it's just kind of tough to get that entry pass around the guy. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to pay more attention to that.
I think it goes along with the theme. Same thing, just this offense, and when it comes to adjusting on the fly, motion, pick and roll, things like that. This team is not in the slightest good at playing 1v1 basketball, meaning if there is a mismatch, I don't think it really matters to the opposing team because, like, Bryce Hopkins really is the only guy, and Bensley. I would say Bensley has done a good job kind of taking his man, driving to the hole. But, like, there hasn't really been any glimpses this year of where, like, all right, like, give him the ball and get out of the way. I don't feel like that is something you can say about anyone on the team, with the exception of Bryce, who last night he got to the rack fairly easily. And I love the ISO offense with Bryce Hopkins. But, yeah, I mean, taking advantage of mismatches, things like that, that's like easy stuff that can really boost your offense. And definitely, I mean, they don't do that kind of stuff at all.
You mentioned Bryce and the ISO. One thing I noticed this year, and I love because it is polar opposite from last year, I think Bryce has developed more of a bag outside of just the dribble spin move. I'll either lay it in or fade or, turn away from the hoop. There were times where you'd have Bryce on the elbow, drive on a guy, and you could close your eyes and see exactly how that spin move was going to play out. Like, you knew exactly what was going to happen, and guys were catching on to that. This year, it's totally different. It feels like he has a completely different bag. He knows to mix it up. He knows, all right, well, let's not run a spin move every time, because that can get redundant, and guys will know how to stop that, 5 minutes into the game. So I just want to give Bryce his flowers on that, because the bag is more diversified this year.
Mm-hmm. I've really enjoyed watching Bryce this year. He looks quick. I was actually worried that he maybe lost a little too much weight. He'd be a little less physical. He's still a very good physical presence. He looks quick. After coming off an injury, to look that quick, that agile, gets to the hoop. Spin move looks good, but obviously, like you said, developing other things, other tools. I think if Bryce continues to play like this, he should be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I completely agree, because he's one of those guys. He can do it all. He's got the size. He can put the ball on the floor, and it's kind of our saving grace in the whole turning defense to offense department, because he can grab a board and he doesn't need to look for an outlet anywhere. He can just take the ball up himself and push it up the court.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I agree. He's Swiss Army knife. So Lev, you had tweeted the other night asking people to give predictions for the DePaul game. Predict the score for a shout out on next episode. Obviously, we do have a couple people who were fairly close. However, I noticed something last night watching the game. It was overtime. I'm laying in bed. I'm tired. Daddy's got work in the morning, but still gonna have the TV on, watch the game. And I was going through just to check. All right, well, who's the closest? The game's almost over. Who's going to be in that ballpark? So this tweet from Ryan, he predicted 68-62 Friars. Arnie Palmy alert predicted 68-64 Friars. So we have 68-62 and 68-64. I then immediately look up at my TV, and the score with 14 seconds left to go in overtime is 68-63. So like dead in the middle. So shout out to Ryan. Shout out to Arnie Palmy alert. That's a fantastic name. Huge Arnie Palmy guy. But the score didn't end like in that ballpark. Like it was fouls and free throws. So they both went from being 1 point off to being a handful of points off. You did send me, it looks like Chuck PC was pretty close. He predicted Friars 71-67. And I believe the final score was 70-63.
Yes, it was 70-63. Yeah, 70-63.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a lot of replies. Someone predicted overtime. Tom Keeling, 85-80 OT Friars win, which that's a normal overtime score with a normal competent offense. But we don't really have that yet. Holding out hope, going to be positive. But 70-63, that was the overtime score, which is incredible, for a Big East game. I mean, I remember, I feel like I've talked about this before, but we had an overtime game against Seton Hall in the Keno Davis era. It was 109-106, and we lost. Single overtime. So, yeah, different times.
Mm-hmm. One of my core Big East memories is that what was it, Syracuse UConn, and it went like 7-8 overtimes.
Oh yeah,
that's the one. That's one of my earliest college basketball memories. That game, I remember waking up out of a dead sleep, and I'm just like, this game's still going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Random thought, I had to throw it out there. The ADHD's kicking in.
Very vividly remember that game. That was a heck of a Big East season. That was special. That was the height of the Big East. But I mean, the league is still phenomenal. So that was the year like ESPN had the whole documentary and everything. Big East is not dead, but it's different,
Very different. I also, again, off topic, I just have so many gripes against like ESPN and these like larger sports media outlets that don't feel the need to market college basketball. Like even like watching Atlantis, it's a lot of people who like, you can tell they just had like some interns go write some reports up for all the teams playing, and they just kind of regurgitated the information from a sheet of paper. It's college basketball, particularly on ESPN, is just like a dying brand. AJ DeBanza went and committed on First Take the other day, and they were just asking the most like softball baseline questions, like, "Oh, well, I thought you were going to pick UNC because that would have been cool to see you play against Duke." I don't know. I just huge gripe, very basic, casual commentary when it comes to college basketball on ESPN.
Yeah, it's that was Stephen A. That was so bad. It was like I don't even have anything to compare it to. It's like, I guess it's like a kid like picking, like Colorado for college football, and then someone being like, "I thought you were going to go to Alabama." Like, like there's other schools,
Yeah.
man. Like, I know you don't follow the sport all that close, but like,
People acted like they were surprised when the Banta went to BYU too. Like BYU isn't going to give them friggin' 8 figures. Oh, why'd you pick them? Well, money talks. So
yeah. And ESPN had to know it was going BYU because if it was if it was a non-ESPN school, I don't think he had a Big East school in his top 3. Like UConn wasn't in there, I don't think.
nope.
So yeah, I mean, if it was a Big East school, they would have been like, no.
That's true. Yeah, it's all the TV deals and politics and all. Anyway, we're done complaining. Good vibes only.
Yep, hell yeah.
We have a voice memo from Captain Bruce.
What's up, guys? Captain Bruce Winchell. We keep this nice and short. We got 2 things to talk about here. Hope to see a lot of Friars at Mohegan on Saturday. And second, fuck Avid Mindsetter.
Wow. Well said.
Well said.
Lev, will you be at Mohegan this weekend?
Unfortunately, no. I was supposed to go, but I have a wedding. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's going to be a good time for all Friar fans involved. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting a win, and I'm hoping that everyone has a really good time. It's always a good time. Nobody drive home too drunk. Just a little bit of a buzz is fine, but no one drive home too drunk. But yeah, I'm sad that I'm missing out because I talked about it all summer. Look forward to it all summer, but do have a wedding I got to go to.
That's brutal. Yeah, I'm 90% making it there. Probably just gonna get a hotel for the night. Probably just gamble my ass off for no reason. Last time, actually, funny story. Last time I went to Mohegan, it was a friend's birthday, and we went out to this bar. There's like a country bar or whatever at Mohegan, and I forget the name of it, but we ended up there. And I'm just walking around the casino, and I'm seeing, Big East apparel everywhere, like St. John's hoodies. I'm seeing UConn shirts. I'm seeing, Villanova hoodies, everything. And every single time I was like, hey, let's go Friars, just like giving people shit, not realizing that the Big East women's basketball tournament is at Mohegan. Had no idea at the time. This was a couple years ago. No idea at the time. And we go to that country bar at Mohegan, and my friends and I start talking to these girls. Literally 2 hours later, don't even have no idea for like 2 hours. And we were just hanging out with the Creighton's women's basketball team. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's why you're tall as shit. But yeah, that was the last time I was at Mohegan. Actually, funnily enough, was another Big East experience. So
that's that is pretty funny. Honestly, I mean,
such a whirlwind. I was so confused. No, Leb, the connecting of the dots while I'm pissed drunk at like 12:30 was just. You should have seen all the wires connect in my head and the light bulb go off. It was nuts. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, so this is actually also pretty funny. Coincidentally, the lore about this wedding is it's in Connecticut, and it's my girlfriend's cousin who, oddly enough, played for the UConn women's team.
Okay.
Yeah,
she must have been good then. Like real good.
She was very, very good. 4-year player. Played about 10 to 20 minutes a night. So not like one of the starters, but really good career there. Won't name names, but so funny that I'm actually missing this for a former UConn
That's
women's
insane.
basketball player, which is it's like anti-web,
Yeah, and this goes against everything you believe in.
Yeah, it does. But I have heard rumors that it's possible that will be in attendance. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Cool. We'll have to get on the pod.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to the game itself. St. Bonaventure is a really, really like not a bad team. So we'll see what happens. It'll be a fun game.
Yeah, hoping for the best. I might just throw a couple $100 on the Friars, and if it hits, just throw the winnings on black, and let fate decide the rest of my night.
I don't blame you. That sounds good to me. Do we have anything else?
No, that's all we got. Friars are the best team in the Big East, and take it to the crib.
All right. Well, I think that might do it. Go Friars. And we'll see you next week.
See you guys. Thanks for listening.
Peace.